Well, all right. Welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation Bridging the Gap with Rex.
And Eva.
And we are so excited.
excited.
Well, what is it in the song? I'm always referring to. I'm so
excited.
I think it's Pointer Sisters.
You say that every
I
time.
know,
You really
because
like the Pointer Sisters?
I do
Every
like the
time
Pointer Sisters.
we play music trivia when we're on
Yes.
vacation, everything that's a female, like, group, you go, the Pointer Sisters.
Well, it's got to be them at some point.
Some
If you
point.
play enough 70s
No.
and 80s music trivia, it's got to be
It's
them.
like, what is that? And true or false, you're 50%, right? 50% of the time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on multiple choice,
You're right.
C.
Yeah.
Just
No,
consistently.
it's B.
Yeah, it is B.
It's
That's
B.
right. It's
You
B.
have put that into me.
I taught you that.
It actually works.
It does work.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Has
what-
nothing to do with this
Absolutely.
episode.
Other than probably like testing.
We do need to look that up,
I'll
though.
bridge it.
Where's
I'll bridge
the
the gap. Ready?
Okay, you bridge it.
We are talking about trivia, multiple choice. Okay, this topic is inspired by one of my high school classes, which we get tested in. There we go. The gap is bridged.
Yes, and actually, I think that's a brilliant idea on your part because you were just sharing with me earlier this week one of the assignments you have, and
Yeah.
when you gave me the subject, I'm like, "That's a podcast
It
episode."
is. It's fantastic.
And so you're going to use
We-
it to kind of prepare for
yeah,
a speech
I've got
this
to give
week,
a speech.
right?
I've been back in school. We are recording this again at Sunday at 9:00. It's becoming a habit. It's really a bad habit. And on Wednesday, so I guess 2 days after this goes out, I have to write a 1.5-minute speech and deliver it in class. Do you know how long I've been back in school? I've been back in school not even a week. I have had 2 classes. This will be my 3rd class in senior thesis, and I will already have a speech due. Do you know how exasperated I am about that?
Are you really?
Yes.
Were you on some really other good news?
What?
I just had one of our interns check,
Oh,
and you know who sings "I Am So Excited"?
Pointer Sisters?
The Pointer
I'm
Sisters.
so
told
proud of
you.
you. I'm so proud of you.
Oh my gosh. Pointer Sisters were
I have to listen
awesome.
to it.
Yes,
Or like
you
fully,
do.
other
Fully.
than just like, see, I think I always get that song mixed up with I Will Survive.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen when you cut these at 9:00 at night.
No,
And I know you hate the term cut.
I
but
do hate that term. But
Why do you hate that so much?
because in modern day and age, cut means like on the chopping block, it's gone.
Yeah.
And so cut, just say record.
Slay.
Slay.
Yeah,
No,
so
I've said
slay.
that so many times. I have like, okay, I reuse words over and over and over and over again until I get tired of them. And you want to know the 5 words I cycle through? It's iconic, silly, slay, exciting. Like, that's so fun.
Yeah.
That's like I use it. I like ironically. Like, you'll tell me the most boring fact. I'll be like, how exciting! Like, that's just my response to everything.
Exactly.
That was 4. I guess it's 4. I can't do numbers,
Well,
but I use iconic a lot, and I
you
used
do
it
use
so
that.
much on our trip. One of the kids goes, "Do you have any other words in your vocabulary, Max?" And I said, "Yes, I do. The iconic describes everything that you are,
Come
so
on.
it works." And then I didn't use it for 24 hours, and he texts me, and he goes, "What happened to iconic? Is it not an iconic kind of day?" And I was like, "It is. I just thought you were tired of it."
Yeah.
And so
Max was a cool little kid that
He
we
was.
met
Shout
from
out
New
Max
York.
from New
Shout
Jersey.
out
New Jersey.
Max. Oh, New Jersey. That's
Jersey.
right. I was
Shout out
thinking it's New
Max.
York. So shout out to our new buddy Max that we met on vacation. So
Yes.
anyway, hey, let's dial this in. Great opener all over the place.
It is.
Pointer
That describes
Sisters.
us very
We
well.
are so excited. But
excited.
let's talk about this speech that you've got coming up
I
and the
do.
topic that kind of tell us the background.
We have to do reading before every class, which is all right. Sometimes it's 10 pages. Sometimes it's 4. Sometimes it's 75 pages before a class. Cough, Paradise Lost. Cough. But this one that we did for our first class is the introduction by Andrew Postman to the book Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. And it is a fantastic. Oh, actually, it's not by Andrew Postman. It's by Neil Postman. I
Yeah,
didn't
but
realize
you
they had the
said
same
that.
last name. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
I'm
part we're reading,
assuming-
the part we're reading is from Neil Postman
Right.
because it's chapter 2. But nonetheless, it's about how we've moved out of a society that more commonly sees the Orwellian, George Orwell's style of government, where it's more
Totalitarianism.
that word,
Yes.
where it's more dictator, where you can easily identify the signs of oppression and like of your own like selves, like your morals and beliefs are now becoming imprisoned into a society where we can't easily identify. It's called the Huxleyan society, the Huxleyan approach, and it's essentially where we are amusing ourselves to death, where we live in a society where we're imprisoned by entertainment and our need for it. And the whole, I'll include this in our link tree, but it's about 5 pages we're reading. I'm sorry, 10 pages we're reading that are essentially talking about how we're moving into a society where our education has failed to get with the times of technology, right? They're still trying to figure out the written word. And so we're not being educated on how to differentiate ourselves from meaningful information in entertainment. And it's very interesting. And the final line, this is my favorite part of the paper. The final line of this document we're reading, it says, "We've gotten to the point where we are laughing instead of thinking, but we did not know what we were laughing about because we had stopped thinking." And it's how we fill our minds with so many like nonsensical things that we stop thinking. And then we blindly take in information that we haven't spent any time thinking about because we'd much rather be laughing. And it's fantastic because we're living in a society where reels are becoming our form of news and they're not always accurate, but we like laughing around with them. And so we don't ever question them.
I think
We're in an era of misinformation because we prefer entertainment over facts.
Yep. And when you showed me this particular reading that you guys have scheduled, I was just immediately fascinated because as soon as I saw George Orwell, I personally have not thought about Orwell in years,
Yeah.
but I did read one of his books
Which
in
one?
high school, Animal
Yeah,
Farm.
I've read that.
It was
I've
required
read
reading.
1984 and Animal Farm.
Yep.
So both of the ones cited in this paper.
And I don't recall that we read 1984, but based on our discussion, I am going to go read it because, again, I'm just fascinated with this topic and how it applies to our current dilemma that we have with this consumer-based society that wants to be entertained all the time. So for those that are maybe looking for just a little bit of background, I am the research guy. We don't have a lot of time to spend on this, but I did go back and I looked at George Orwell, the time that he lived, and I looked at Aldous Huxley. And so when you start talking about Orwellian theory versus Huxleyan theory, both of them were British born. They were British educated. Orwell actually came to America, I think, in like the 1930s and lived the latter part of his life in Los Angeles. But basically, you can look it up. This is all on Wikipedia, but they both were born right around the turn of the century in the 1900s. I think one of them died in 1950, and then the other one died in like 1963. But George Orwell, again, the author of Animal Farm, the book that I've read, wrote basically political analogies. And Animal Farm specifically is a kind of analogy about what happened to the Soviet Union.
A parody.
Yeah, it's a parody.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And go ahead. No,
No, you go ahead. Jump in.
It mentioned it in here, and it's about comparing it to entertainment. It's how we find more enjoyment in junk TV that's not a parody of, or that's a parody of what's going on in the world because we can sympathize and joke about the terrible issues, and we would much rather see that than hear the actual facts of the news. And so people would rather watch Saturday Night Live and hear the news in a parody form like that than watch the actual news and hear the tragedy of it. It was very interesting.
That is interesting.
Sorry, I just thinking
No,
of
no,
parodies.
no. And so, I was just remembering a little bit about Animal Farm, when I read the book, and I thought, it started with all animals are created equal. And then by the end of the book, the pigs had taken over, and they have rearranged the sign to say all pigs are created equal. And so it's just this political story about, hey, be careful what you wish for. And again, the pigs in this particular case became the totalitarian rulers that basically established the rules that benefited them while the rest of the farm animals suffered. It's a great story. Now, on the other hand, you've got Huxley, and he was adamantly opposed against technology. He just had a lot of concerns about television, obviously was becoming very big in his lifetime. And he saw the great things that were involved in television, but he also saw the dangers in it, that the messaging kind of tended to lead you toward a specific conclusion. And he was totally opposed against that. And then when you think about it, okay, he was dealing with television. What in the world would he think now about the advent of the iPhone, social media, and all the messaging that comes from that? So,
I think, first off, I think he would be adamantly against it. But I think, based off what I've learned from this paper, I think he'd be adamantly against it, but a user of it. Because you can't deny progress and say, and it's wonderfully worded in here, and I'm butchering it, but you can't deny progress and push it away and say, no, I refuse to do it, because all you're doing is making everybody around you suffer and setting your own self back. Because if the entire world has moved on to using technology and you're saying, nope, absolutely not, it's terrible, we should have stuck with the way things are, you're denying progress and saying that things could be better and trying to solve problems that no, oh, look, we can find cures for cancer a whole lot easier because of this technology. Well, nope, I'm against technology, so you're against. It's like it snowballs into being against a lot of bigger progress things. And so, but also, it was better worded in this. But I think he would be a user of it, right? Because he would have to go with the times. But I think he would be one of the people that is like, in 2024 still uses a flip phone, so it does its job, right? You're not going to allow yourself to be lost to the reels and things like that, because the technology in all of its greatness is also our biggest downfall. And so I think it's your approach and your mindset to it changes how you view and use technology. And I think he would use it, but not use it the way, say, teenagers use it. I think he would use it more in a just for need and necessity.
yeah, and I think we're faced with the same dilemma.
Yep.
You and I talk about that a lot. How do you get away from all of this mindless scrolling,
Yep.
which, let's face it, if we're all honest, we're susceptible to that,
Mindless
and we
scrolling.
all do it. Mindless scrolling. And before you know it, you have wasted 20 minutes or more.
Mhm.
Sometimes people, yeah, again, let's be honest, folks, you can mindlessly scroll for an hour or maybe even an hour plus,
Oh, for
and then
sure.
you're
I've done it.
wondering, yeah, you're wondering, what in the world did I do with that
And
hour?
what could I have been doing better? Like, what was a better use of my time?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So I think it's a battle that we're going to continue to
Yep.
fight, but awareness of any problem is the initial step
Yep.
in the problem solution.
I completely agree. I'm going back to this because I think it is a fantastic article, but I completely agree with it. It's the Huxley mindset worldview, the world, the Huxleyan world. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Is a much harder to identify and oppose than a Orwellian one, because an Orwellian one, you can see the signs of oppression and leadership a whole lot quicker, because there's going to be a poor party and a reigning party, right? There's going to be that big difference. But in the Huxleyan one, everybody's partaking in it, and it's the greatest case of like peer pressure ever. I feel like the world we're living in, where it's like, what do you mean you don't have Instagram? I mean, everybody communicates on Instagram. Why don't you want to communicate with people? They don't even talk about the fact that Instagram was originally created to post about your life, because we don't care about that anymore. Do you know how many people have social media and never post on it? They just use it to communicate and scroll. And so it's turned into a form of communication. We no longer write letters. I was writing a check the other day for someone. I had to Google how to write a check, because that's not something my generation does. We use Venmo, we use Cash App, all those things. We're having to adapt into a time where we're completely reliant on technology. And I think it's a fantastic question, is what would our world look like without it? What would our world look like without technology? And it's impossible to think about, because technology's been around since forever, because every time there's been progress, it's been a new change in technology.
Yeah, and especially for you, again, we have multiple family conversations about this. It's hard for you to imagine a world without it. It's hard for you to imagine a world without the iPhone
It's hard for me
because
to
it,
imagine a world without streaming, without YouTube, without any of that, because I've grown up with all of it.
right. But I, on
Yep.
the other hand, I lived in a world without all of that, so it's easier for me to compare and contrast.
Yep.
Hey, what do I like about this current world
Yep.
or culture, whatever we want to call it, and then what do I miss about quote unquote the old days? Well, here's a Bible verse that really helped me out of Ecclesiastes. It said, "Quit talking about the old days because they're not coming back." And so that
I
really
just saw
helped.
that verse for the first time recently.
Did you really? Yeah, because that was in our 1 year Bible reading. We just
Yep.
finished up Ecclesiastes a couple of days ago.
Yep.
But it's in there. I'm paraphrasing, but it says, quit talking about
Yep.
the old days because those are gone. And so today, again, there's new challenges, there's new situations, there's new
And you
struggles,
can take that wisdom and apply it, but you can't expect everybody to go back to where you were.
especially when it's a world that doesn't exist for you.
Yep.
And so one of the things that, your mother and I have always struggled with is, I feel like you missed out. Not just you, your generation. We
You
talk
meaning
about
my
how
entire generation.
yeah,
Yeah.
when we played outside all the time,
Yep.
that's just the way it was. You came home, there was no distraction. You might watch a quick 30-minute TV show when you got home from school. But after that, generally, now the rule at my house was you couldn't go outdoors and play until you got your homework done. So normally that took about 30 minutes, and that's totally changed. You
Oh, it
can't
takes
even
me
relate to
hours
that.
to do
Yeah,
my homework.
exactly.
I mean, I'm reading Paradise Lost by Milton, and I'm reading book 3, which is a fantastic book. We should also talk about that at some point, or just the classics. But it took me an hour and 20 minutes to get through the first book while annotating it because it was so challenging. But then also having to like answer the work questions and do my math homework and work on my senior thesis and do all the reading for government and econ. It takes me 2 to 4 hours, sometimes longer. I mean, generally when I have a paper or a speech due, it takes me 8 to 12 hours to get my homework done, which is completely ridiculous. But when you only go to school for 12 hours a week, it's expected.
Yeah. And so
But I
that,
can't imagine 30 minutes. I haven't
yeah.
done homework that took less than 30 minutes since like 3rd grade.
But you've also got to remember too,
Yep.
again, it's two totally different
Yeah,
worlds.
for
Back
sure.
then, when I'm talking about 30 minutes, it was basically problems and questions that you were answering based on the reading
Yep.
in the instructional material. And so the amount of information available was limited.
Yep.
Remember,
Yep.
I had a 1973 set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. Thank God for Encyclopedia Britannica, because that's where I got most of my history lessons from in terms of additional information. But there was no online
No
research.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, none of that. And so you've got this glut of
Yep.
information that you have to wade through
Yep.
to write papers and to position yourself to make an argument in defense of a thesis
Yep.
on a paper. We just didn't have all that information.
We're
So
we're more informed, but honestly, it feels like we're less prepared as well because there is so much information, it's easy to miss things. And so I feel like we're well informed on how to do stuff, but less prepared on how to apply it.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed all the time with
Yeah.
homework.
I
But
think we all are.
yeah.
And from a life perspective, let's just fast forward. Okay, again, those days that
Mhm.
I grew up where we would go do 30 minutes of homework, you might watch a 30-minute TV show. Then you went outside and you rode your bikes and you played baseball and you threw a football and you played chase and dodgeball
Yep.
with the neighbors' kids. And then, man, it was dark and time to come in for dinner. That's just the way it was. Well, we're never going back to
No.
that.
I
But
mean, growing
I
up, there
have
was only 2 kids my age that lived within like 3 blocks of us that we knew of. And so it wasn't like I would go out and spend hours outside. I'd have to invite someone over. We'd have to plan the play date, all these different things just for us to play for 3 hours.
And again, you
Yeah.
really don't know
I
any
don't. I
different.
don't.
But for me, knowing that there was something
Yeah.
at one time that was different, it does grieve my heart because of the simplicity of what I
You
experienced
lived a
in
very simple
yours.
childhood.
I did, and I loved it. But again, back to the Ecclesiastes
Yeah.
verse, it's not coming back.
No.
So, how do we make the best
Yep.
of the current environment that
Yep.
we're in? And how do we do that smartly and efficiently? And the whole point of this paper is, hey, how do you think? A quote I
Yeah.
saw years ago: thinking is hard work. That's why so few people engage in it. Well, it's
That's the
hard
truth.
to wade through this information, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think the solution to our countless scrolling and mindless entertainment and things like that is just identifying the fact that, wow, this is a really addictive task, right? Just scrolling. Well, either if I want to do it, I need to set a timer and make myself get up after, or I just need to not do it. It's thinking and identifying that, oh, watching this reality TV show, it adds no value to my life other than entertainment. I'm not going to let it control mine, right? Or all of this information I learn on this show, like Grey's Anatomy, it's been deemed one of the most medically inaccurate shows of all time. Yet it's the reason a lot of people go into medical. Same thing with suits. It's a very inaccurate representation of law, yet a lot of people go to law school because of the show. You have to remind yourself and identify, wow, if I'm interested in this, I need to do more research outside of it and not let entertainment teach me, because it's laced with bias, opinion, and simplification that distorts the meaning of and truth.
Well, you just said a key word, bias. A
Yeah.
lot of the information we see, we know this is biased. As a matter of fact, I learned this from my history instructor at LSU when I was going through my master's degree. The very first thing he taught us about books is,
About books.
yeah,
Sorry, I was asking for water.
I'm like, what is she pointing to? The very first thing he taught us about books as we prepared to write our master's thesis, he's like, hey, you really need to research the background of the author, because every author is writing from a specific angle and they are trying to convince you of a particular point of view. That's the whole reason they
Well, that's
feel
why they often
passionate
say the history
about writing the
books are.
book.
That's why they often say history books are written by the victors, and so if you want to know both sides of the story, you have to find the lesser known books by the losers.
Precisely. And in terms of, I don't want to get into a political discussion, but I know which one of my Facebook acquaintances are of each political party persuasion. And I read multiple opinions just because I want to know, hey, what does that side think? And what is the passion point for them? And why are they so energetic about that particular point? I like to know that because I like to have
Yep.
rational, reasonable, civil conversations with people. And I think that's part of the problem too. But we get this glut of information and we tend to divide it into one camp or the other. And you have position A or you have position B, but we've lost the ability to have a rational conversation. And again, a civil debate about our differences. Hey, I don't understand why you think that. I respect that
Yeah.
opinion, but can you help me understand? Why are you so passionate about that? You don't hear many of those
No,
conversations
You're paying for an
anymore.
education that teaches me how to do that. But my school, the way we're taught, is a very small minority of most of the high schoolers coming out of into the world now. And our pastor said it beautifully today. I don't know if you heard this, but he said, essentially, he goes, we live in a world where we're united by our love for Christ, but we're allowing our politics and our beliefs and our mindsets to divide us so much so that we can refuse each other. And we're forgetting, because we were studying the fruits of the Spirit, we're forgetting to love each other, which is the greatest commandment. And we're pushing people away just because we don't agree with them. Well, that's not what our nation was built on. And I mean, I'm continuing on with what he was saying. This
Right.
is not what he said anymore. But we were in the United States of America. We were built on a nation where the political parties existed to give people a voice and an opinion, so that it wasn't just a one size fits all for everything. However, it went from being just back in your day, people with differing beliefs could still sit and have coffee with each other and be best friends and everything just because they voted for somebody else. But we're now letting who we vote for, right? Voting, yes, it's a one-time thing and it makes 4 years of impact, but we're letting that one thing, especially during these election years, completely change and distort how we view friendship and love and relationships and all of these things. Because just because you don't agree with me, you are entirely wrong and an awful human being, is essentially the mindset our world has gone to. And it's unfortunate and it's sad and it's not true.
Yeah, it's not true, and it's disturbing.
It is.
On multiple levels.
And it's fueled, I'll tell you this now, because what is the thing? What is the catalyst of things that have changed within the last 50 years that have made it impossible for people to have civil discussions? It's the overabundance of entertainment. Entertainment often portrays politics and relationships as extremely unhealthy, dramatized, is that the word?
Yeah.
Dramatized aspects and spectacles, and we believe that's how it should look in real life, and we're distorting the spectacle for real life, and we're putting it into our own lives, and it's entirely unnecessary.
Yeah, and I think that's one of Huxley's
Yeah,
points
for
is
sure.
that he felt that technology, especially media, was just going to blur the line between your ability to discern, hey, this is a different topic in terms of educational views, political views, religious views, but all of a sudden this technology takes it and tries to ball it
Yep.
all into one big entity, and then you cut it right down the middle and you're either on one side or the
Yep.
other. Is that accurate? Do you
Yeah,
kind of,
I
does that
agree.
make sense?
I
Yeah.
agree. So I think technology is our greatest endeavor and our biggest downfall at the same time. Or not endeavor, our greatest aspect of life, right? It's our future. We're moving into a world that's entirely run by tech. But it's also our biggest downfall because if we can't, because I'm gonna be completely honest, there are a lot of people out there, like you said, who don't think. They don't have common sense, and that's all right. I mean, I forget to think in some situations too. It's not a discount on anything, but it goes back to our education is failing us. It's teaching us how to think, how to identify truth from fact, how to identify fact from lies, and we're allowing entertainment, no matter how dramatic or goofy it's supposed to be, to become truth in our own lives, and it's not I mean, it's distorting how we view each other in the world and all of those things, and so if you wanna prevent yourself from being lost to the tidal wave that is entertainment, it's educate yourselves and learn and constantly be trying to learn things from paper and from your elders and different things like that, because then you'll be able to identify that, "Wow, this is just absolutely chaotic and untrue. I can enjoy it from an entertainment standpoint, but I'm not gonna let it change how I view the world." And it's our education is what's gonna keep us from being lost to the false advertisement that is entertainment.
Yeah, and you make a great point with that, and I think this is probably a great place we can kind
Yeah.
of start to wrap this particular episode up. But to your point about, hey, we have to have a rational thought process. I think we have to continue to learn from each other also, and that's one of the whole genesis behind our podcast, Generation to Generation. We've always maintained this ability to talk in an open, honest manner. No question is off limits. Well, as I continue to engage with young people, I got to tell you, even this week, I taught some classes at our local college, and I was so inspired by the questions that the students asked with limited information. I really went into this particular class with the intention of not presenting a lecture. And I just wanted to throw out a couple of big thoughts, so to speak, because I knew it was an area they weren't very
Yep.
familiar with. So I just threw 2 to 3 items out and I talked maybe 5 minutes. And then I said, just based on that, what are your questions?
Discussion.
Discussion. They asked questions for the next 50 minutes just based off some opening remarks. And it was so refreshing. It was so energizing because the quality and the relevance of the questions, they were incredible. And I was like, wow, this is the younger generation. And
And we have
these,
entirely different viewpoints of life, and when they all come together, we can have a discussion to decide what we believe is true and what's not. But it doesn't happen through somebody telling us what to think. It happens from us figuring it out for ourselves.
exactly. And because you've been raised, we've used this term before, you're a digital native, I'm a digital immigrant. We have to learn from each other. And I have to ask you questions. Well, hey, Eva, what about that particular technology? How is that impacting your daily life? And give me some insight into that. And, I bumped into 4 guys on campus and they were asking me, hey, at your age, looking back, what is the biggest piece of advice that you can give us as we continue to move forward? Well, that's a great question. It's a loaded question. And so I answered it, but it inspired me that they even asked me that question,
Hmm.
that I've got it in my notepad for tomorrow. I'm texting all 4 of those guys that asked me that question, and I'm going to sit down with them and say, hey, you asked me a question looking back. Now, I want to ask you a question looking forward. What are you most excited about? What do you think your biggest strength is? And what is your biggest anxiety about the future? And let's talk about
Yep.
that. But I'm looking for them to educate me about I've said this a lot of times before. I'm not 17 for you, Eva, is different than 17 for
No,
me.
you're also
Well,
not a 17-year-old female girl who that you've never been, but you're or who's a digital native or anything. And so my experiences in life, you've had to educate yourself the entire time you were parenting me on what I was experiencing, because my biggest struggle in second grade, completely different from yours. My
right.
biggest struggle at 17, completely different from yours.
Yep.
I want to thank you for that. You've done a fantastic job of always like not letting your own experiences dictate how you parented me. You took the way I was growing and how I learned and how I adapted to things and you've taught me based off that, not making me learn off of how you do it. And it's amazing. I think it's why we have such a great relationship, is because I've never felt like I've had to fit in a box to be perfect for you or anything. And you've always let me make mistakes. And I think that's one thing also, I'm going to wrap it back into our thing. Entertainment is not letting people make mistakes anymore because everything is digitized. And that's something that's so beautiful about in-person relationships, is because you can make mistakes and be your true self without having a camera and 15 million people dictating whether what they believe you did is right or wrong.
Eva Davis, there is nothing that I can add to that. That is, thank you for closing this out with some really great thoughts. And you're right. It's worked really, really well for us. And it has been a joy for us to parent you through these conversations that we're talking about. And so it's just been kind of cool.
Thank you.
I can't add anything to what you just
I'll give
said.
the TLDR, the too long didn't read, essentially of what I just said. And it's put the phones down and interact in in-person relationships with your kids, with your friends, with your parents, with the random person you pass on the street, because you can be so much more real. That's not really the best way to word that. You can be real. You can be authentic. You can make mistakes, and you don't have to worry about everybody judging you. And I live by this little silly motto that I call the law of the fools. And it's essentially, you can act a fool as long as no one will ever see you again, or you trust them with your firstborn. And it's essentially, it's a very fun way of saying, live life not being scared of embarrassing yourself, because it's a whole lot more fun and you can learn a lot more when you're not scared to ask for help.
Right. And because of that, we've approached our life
caring
that
what
way.
people think is essentially.
Yeah. And you've seen me do some things out of town
Yeah.
that you might not see me do here locally. But like, for instance, you've seen me dance down the middle of a grocery store aisle
Or
in
throw
Gatlinburg.
one of my favorites is or throwing adult diapers in random people's shopping carts and running off.
I did not do that. You did that.
Me and Mama did that.
Yes, you and your mother did that.
No,
So,
but somebody asked me the other day, what's my most embarrassing moment? I said, I don't know. I embarrass myself every day. I just choose not to care. When you stop caring about what people think about, yes, I still care what people think about me.
sure.
But when you stop caring in a sense of like being scared if a camera is always on you, essentially living your life feeling like it's going to be on reality TV and edited and your words taken out of context, you can have a lot more fun, and you can go up to the random person on the street and say, hey, I love the passion you have for life. How did you get it? And you can just don't be scared to have a real life conversation and put down the phone and step away from technology. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this, is live in a world where we're not controlled by technology. We just adapt and use it.
Wow. And again, I can't add anything to that. You've done a phenomenal job with this kind of train of thought, with this paper that you've got.
I've got that speech down now.
You got it. So
Yes.
I'm glad we could help. And so we always want to remember, let's always be able to talk from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and to leave a review, because it helps people who don't know about us find our message. If you want to follow us on our socials, go to G2G_podcast on Generation to Generation on Facebook. And special thanks to our editors at Reborn Media.